So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I was putting my head in English. Welcome, everyone. Welcome for those watching us through the internet. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. So, this month we have been talking about Christianity, and today Teresa will talk about Paul of Tarsus, the apostle of the Gentiles. But, as usual, before we start, Sandra will do the initial reading and our prayer. All right? Thank you, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be doing the reading from the book Happy Life. It's a small book, but it's a great book. Huge. And it's from Givaldo Franco and Joana de Angelis, The Spirit. You definitely will not solve all of the world's problems. However, you can and should contribute to that goal. If you cannot stop wars from happening, you have the resources to keep disturbing discussions away from you. If you are not able to feed the hunger masses, you still have a crust of bread to offer to someone. If you cannot give health to the sick, you can still assist a patient. If you cannot solve human dramas, you can still help calm a person down. If you do not have the means to lead groups that will accelerate changes that the world needs, change yourself inwardly, ennobling yourself with good actions and solidarity. So let's bow our heads, elevate our thoughts to God, our Creator, to Jesus, our Master of Love, our guiding light, and to all the spirits present here today, the incarnate and discarnate ones. Ask them to bless us, to enlighten us with the teachings that will be given to us from Paul of Tarsus and from our friend Teresa. We ask Jesus to brighten Teresa's heart and mind so she can be clear in giving us the message. And we ask that God bless us and give us the peace and the harmony that we all need to learn those lessons. And so be it. Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. Doing this lecture, it feels like someone asked to an ant to talk and understand about an elephant. Almost impossible. And so I'm going to really be scratching about who Paul of Tarsus was. He was known as the apostle of the Gentiles, and the Gentiles at the time were everybody who was not Jewish. So that's how the Jewish would call everybody who was not Jewish. If you're not Jewish, you're a Gentile. Which pretty much was the pagans at the time, the people who have no beliefs or anything. And that was the main aim of Paul's mission while he was over his 20 years. But before we're talking about Paul of Tarsus, we have to talk about Saul of Tarsus, because you cannot talk about one without talking about the other one. So Paul of Tarsus was not always Paul of Tarsus, so he was Saul. Saul was born in Tarsus, that's why Saul of Tarsus, of course, which was the capital of Sicilia in the beginning of the first century. He was born in a Jewish family from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was also a Roman citizen. And actually the fact that he was a Roman citizen is going to actually help him later on during his mission. He was a Pharisee, so which means that he was a doctor of the law, so he had a knowledge of the divine laws. So at the time, the Pharisees was known as being the people with the highest knowledge. They knew all the laws and they were well educated, and that was Paul of Tarsus. Gamaliel was his preceptor, so helped him on all his teachings and knowledge that he had as a Pharisee. And he was also a trained craftsman, because at that time, the tradition of the time of the Jewish is that no matter if you were poor, rich, or which status you had, all men had to learn some kind of a craft. And because Tarsus was an area that produced a lot, and actually was the main thing that they produced was wool, he learned how to make tents from wool. So that's what he was trained in, and that also will help him later on. In Jerusalem, he had a very important status as a Pharisee, and he was part of the Synedrion. He possessed a very powerful intelligence and a high culture, and he actually could speak fluent Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, which also later on helped him during his missions. So in general, he lived a life of a really high status and privilege inside the Jewish community. And Saul had a fiancée. So his fiancée was called Abigail, and he really nurtured this really profound and sincere love for Abigail. She was his true love. And Abigail, years before met Saul, she lived with her father and her brother Jeziel in Corinth, and her mother had passed away, so the three of them are living in Corinth. And then the Romans invade Corinth. They kill her father, they take away her brother Jeziel as a slave to work for the Romans, and she's able to run away to Jerusalem, where she's adopted by a couple called Zechariah and Ruth. And she never ever heard about her brother anymore. She never knew what happened with him, if he died, where he is, nothing. Meanwhile, Jeziel is taken as a slave by the Romans, works for many years as a slave, and then finally he's released. But when he's released, he's very, very sick. And he ended up in Peter's church. So Peter the apostle with another couple of apostles, they had a church in Jerusalem, which was pretty much just a place where they would receive all the sick, all the people who had nothing to eat, and just be and help each other and help the poor, help the sick. And that's what it was. And it was also a place where they would study Jesus' gospel. So Jeziel was brought there because he's very sick. Peter and the apostles take care of him and introduce him to Jesus' gospel. And he's absolutely amazed by it. And he not only becomes a Christian, but he also later is going to become the first martyr of the Christian history. He embraces it so much that he starts to preach, but his lectures are just contagious. Like, he really preaches with his soul, and he starts also, just like the apostles, to cure people. And he changed his name. So he changed his name to Stephen. And Jeziel, or Stephen, also has no idea what happened to his sister, right? So never has contact with his sister. So now he's Stephen, he's preaching in Jerusalem, and he starts to become very famous because everybody's talking about him. And Saul, who was already kind of irritated by this whole Christian movement, because he was very proud of his Jewish upbringing and his roots, he's already irritated and starts to hear about Stephen. And he decides that he wants to know more about this guy. And he actually goes to talk about him with his preceptor Gamaliel. Gamaliel was always a very tolerant man. And Gamaliel, he doesn't necessarily becomes Christian, but he starts to listen and analyze what are those people saying, but most of all, what are they doing? And he actually tells to Saul, said, you know what, Saul? If you really look, they're doing nothing wrong. If anything, they're doing the good. Look at how many people they're helping. Like, they're helping the miserables, they're helping the sick, the poor. It's actually very nice what they are doing, right? And Saul kind of gets upset because he cannot believe that Gamaliel, of all the people, are not supporting him and, think that this whole thing is an absurd. He then decides, you know what, I'm going to go there and I'm going to see this guy. I want to see him close. I want to see what is that about that everybody talks about, this is Stephen. So he takes 2 friends and go there to the church on a day that Stephen is gonna have a lecture. So he sits there, gets in there, sees the bunch of people dirty, in rags, sick, a little bit disgusted by the place. And he even thinks, you know what? I think they're just overrating this place. It's not possible that everything that they're talking about is coming from this place, right? Because he's used to the luxury of the synagogues and the Synedrium. So there was, for him, this was the idea of power, right? Then he thought, no, power here? Where? So he sits down, and Stephen comes and does this amazing lecture from his heart. And Saul is actually touched by it. And he recognized there is this mysterious beauty in everything that Stephen has said. And that's actually his first real contact with the gospel of Jesus. However, his pride is so much bigger, that the speech, and I think it's the fact that it did touch him, that he's now, if he was upset with the movement, now he's very angry. Now he's very, very angry at this whole Christian movement and everything. And he thinks this is an absurd what he's been saying there. He even tries to argue with Stephen, and Stephen says, you know what, I'm not going to argue, because Jesus told us, you know what, walk away from discussion. It's not worth it. So he tries to provoke, doesn't get anything. So by the time he leaves there, he's now on a personal vendetta against Stephen. He now decides, you know what, I'm going to take him down. It's an absurd what he's doing, and this is stopping here, because he recognizes the danger. He sees the teachings as a danger to the Mosaic laws, to everything that he believed. So, in a dishonest way, he finds a way for Stephen to be arrested, and Stephen is judged, and the final verdict is that he's going to be get the death penalty by stoning. And on the day that this event is supposed to happen, Abigail is actually coming to Jerusalem to visit Saul for the first time. And that's the day that he's going to introduce Abigail to his friends and kind of present to society and say, you know, pretty much let's book the date and now we're going to get married. And he has all these dreams of, you know, this very happy marriage with Abigail, which is the love of his life. And Abigail and he invites her to go to see the stoning. And Abigail really doesn't want to go, because just the idea of having a human being being stoned really upsets her. But he really insists, and she decides to go just to please him. So she's there now, watching the stoning, and when her brother is almost dead, that's when Abigail recognizes Jezeel. So she recognizes her brother dying there. Yeah, it's a hard part of the story, but so she recognizes the brother. The brother dies in front of her, and Saul now is desperate, because now all his dreams of matrimony were just destroyed, because there's no way that a man with his status would marry a woman that was connected with someone like Stephen, like wouldn't look good on his status at all. So he breaks up with Abigail. Abigail goes back, and okay, it's okay. So Abigail goes back home and meets someone called Ananias, who's a disciple of Jesus, who tells her about everything about Jesus' gospel, and she becomes a Christian as well. Meanwhile, Saul, who loves her so much, decides, you know what, I love her so much, I can forgive her, right, because she did something wrong, so I can forgive her, and I still want to marry her. So he decides to go and meet Abigail. The problem is that too late, because Abigail gets very, very sick, and by the time Saul comes to see her, Abigail is actually dying, and she in fact dies in his arms. So now we went for a guy who was very mad and against the Christians, to a guy who's now furious. He's now completely mad against the Christians. Mad, like he's furious, because now he decided that Jesus and his disciples were guilty of everything that happened, of the destruction of his dreams, the death of Abigail, everything. So now he's on a mission, like on a true mission. So he goes back to the Synedrium, and he actually convinces everybody in there to give him a carte blanche. So basically, the right to go and do this whole campaign against the Christians, really hunt them down, and basically say, do you deny Jesus? No? Then I can do whatever I want to do. I could kill this person. I could do anything. So it's up to him to decide what he would do with the people who didn't deny Jesus. And he decides that he's going to start with Ananias, because Ananias is the one who converted his beloved Abigail. So he said, you know what? That's where I'm going to start, because I wanted this guy. So he finds all the ways to find out where Ananias is. And Ananias is in Damascus. So that's when he now gets his three friends, and goes to Damascus with all his documents in hand, saying that he's allowed to do whatever he wants, and he goes there. But then it comes the famous scene that everybody knows. As he's at the doors of Damascus, he sees a light coming. He falls from his horse blind, and he hears a voice saying, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he's blind, he cannot see, and say, who are you? And he says, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. And on that moment, he knew in his heart that he was transformed. He knew at that moment, he understood the power of Jesus in that moment, and he knew that from now on, he would be his missionary. He would be his disciple. His friends not understanding anything, because his friends cannot see anything, although they're not blind. They think he's talking with nothing, so they think he went mad, because there's nothing there, he's talking alone. He is now blind, so he sends two of his friends back to Jerusalem to let them know what happened, and asks the third one to take him to Damascus, because Jesus tells him, son, go to Damascus and wait, because what you need, it will be brought to you. Remember, he's going to Damascus to kill Ananias. Guess who comes to rescue him? So Ananias, in a vision, is told, go to this address, because Saul is there waiting for you, and he needs your help. And Ananias even saying, but that's the guy who's coming to kill us. Like, you sure? And they say, yes, go there. So Ananias goes there and cures his blindness. And he's actually the first one to also introduce Paul to his first teachings, to the gospel, the teachings of gospel. So from that moment on, he knows, this is what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm here for. So he knew that from that moment he would be a faithful missionary of Jesus. So he starts his missionary journey. And Paul was convinced, he knew inside of his heart that his main mission would be to be bringing the gospel to the Gentiles. But there was a side of him that knew that he needed to bring this word, this knowledge, to his own people, to the Jewish people. So we're going to talk about his 4 journeys, but on every single one of those journeys, every city that he went, the first place that would go and preach would be at the local synagogue. So he always made sure, because even though his words and what he was saying was for the Gentiles, but he thought that his own people need to hear that as well. So he always, every single city, he first would go, where's the local synagogue? That's where he would preach first, and then he would go to the other areas. So that was a characteristic of all his missions. The other characteristic of all the missions that we're going to talk about is that in every single city or place that he passed by, he left a church. He founded a church. And just to clarify, what we call a church today is completely different what a church was at the time. So when you think a church today, we're talking about a physical building with a steep and a bell and, a big door, and that's what it's a church for us, right? At that time, church has nothing to do with the physical space. Nothing to do. Church was actually a group of people who got together to study the gospel. That's what it was. So actually, the first church in history, the first Christian church, were families. Was the father, the mother, the kids, and maybe, you know, the other brother would come. So they would choose someone's house, and then the whole family would come there, and they would study the gospel of Jesus. That's what it was, a church at the time. So basically, in every city that he passed by, he left at least one group of family there studying the gospel. He would drop the knowledge, and they would study. Every single city that he passed by, he did that. So he had, it helps if I turn it on. So Paul's first missionary journey, and I just brought a map just to have an idea of how much he actually did. So this is his first missionary. He starts in Antioch, and then he goes to Cyprus. So visits 2 places in Cyprus, goes to another Antioch city in here, then he goes to Iconium, then he goes to Lystra, Derbe, okay? And just quick remind, we're not talking about speedboat, jet ski, helicopter, train, jet, private. He didn't get his private jet and went all of those places. There's nothing like that. Lucky, he would get a horse. I think that was the best thing that you could get at the time. He could get a horse. Anybody volunteering to do this by horse and walking, and by sailboat? Swimming, sailboat, which depends on the winds, like anybody. He did it. Okay. So his first missionary journey was from the years 45 and 49, and he was with Barnabas and John. So every single missionary trip that he did, journey, he always had someone with him. And on his first one, he has Barnabas and John. And that's when he starts to use his Greek name, Paul. So that's when the soul actually becomes Paul of Tarsus. And I'm just going to bring some highlights of those journeys that they did, because each journey could be easy and an hour lecture. Okay. So remember, he starts Antioch, and he actually had to leave they had to leave Antioch pretty much quickly, and because the Pharisees there didn't like at all, because they were envy. As soon as they start then doing their lectures, they get so envy for the way that they can attract the people and for the beauty of the things that they sing. They get very angry and they start to persecute them. So they have to leave Antioch pretty quick. From Antioch, they go to Iconium. And then in Iconium, they had to run away even faster because they've been stoned. They were actually stoned out of the city. And basically because what happened when they were in Iconium, the Greeks and the Jews were absolutely amazed about what they were saying. Amazed. They were like mesmerized. And then the Pharisees look and say, no. This is too dangerous. We don't want those guys here. So they literally stoned them out of the city. And that's not a singular event, like being persecuted, stoned, offended, and all the things that you can happen pretty much happen in almost every single city that they went through all his journeys, right? So there was like, after a while, I think they were almost getting used to it, if you can ever get used to it. At the end of this journey, he had to go back to Antioch because Antioch was starting to have some problems. And actually, the problem that they were having in Antioch was a problem that was happening already for a while since the departure of Jesus. When Jesus departed, we have to remember that a lot of the Christians, the converted Christians, were actually Jewish. And although they were converted Christian, they were still very attached to their traditions. So to their dogmas and their rituals and everything, even though they were Christians. And now you had some people who are Gentiles, who had no traditions at all, at least no religious traditions, who now become Christian. So now you have two groups of Christians here. You have the converted Jews and you have the converted Gentiles. And they start to fight between them. And that happened right after Jesus left, because then they start to decide how things are going to be done. Oh, but I think certain traditions, so the Jews say, no, but certain traditions should be kept. And then, but the Gentiles are like, no, but I don't have those traditions. So they start to fight. And basically the fight is the converted Jews wanted to impose to the converted and Gentiles their traditions. Because they think if you're now Christian, you have to follow those traditions as well, right? So they call Paul and say, Paul, and it's not by phone or email. Imagine, like, they send a letter, it gets to Paul, and then Paul says, yeah, sure, send a letter back that I'm coming, and then, maybe weeks later he arrives in there. They have a big meeting, and they decide, you know what? Nobody's going to force anybody nothing. If you want to be Christian and keep your traditions from your Jewish traditions, that's fine. That's not a problem. If that's what makes you feel better, it's a way for you to understand your Christianity, that's great. And you Gentiles don't have to follow the tradition. So basically, nobody can force nobody to do anything. We all Christians, and that's the way it is. Okay, so he has to go all the way to Antioch just to stop that madness that was happening there. So now he's Antioch. And then he starts to get ready for his I'm lost on my. I must be missing. Oh yeah. So now he starts to get used to his second mission. Okay. So his second mission, he is already. Oh, sorry, wrong one. So he's already then in Antioch, anyways. Remember, he was there to solve that problem. And then from them he goes to Derbe, and then he goes to Troas, Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea, Corinth, Athens. Then from there he goes to Athens, Corinth, and then Ephesus, and then he ends up in Jerusalem. The main characteristic of all this journey, of all the places that he visits, is Athens. So Paul, who was a highly educated man, had this vision in his mind. It was the perfect plan, like the perfect plan. He thought, you know what? If I get all this thing that I have, like all this amazing gospel that I know, all this knowledge, and I bring to the people who has the knowledge in their hands, which at the time was the Greeks. Athens was the crib of knowledge. That's where you had all the philosophers. Anybody who learned from the knowledge that came from Athens, that came from Greece, because they were the brains at the time, right? The philosophers, they contain all the knowledge in their hands. So Paul's plan was like, perfect. I'm going to go to Athens. Those guys are highly educated, so they're able to think rationally, right? When I present this thing to them, they're going to say, oh my gosh, how we didn't learn this before. And they're going to spread to their disciples, and then we're going to spread the gospel of Jesus in a manner of flesh. It's going to be faster than Facebook. He thought on his mind, right? Perfect plan. He had no doubt in his mind that this plan would fail. Like he knew it would work no matter what. He goes to Athens, start to talk with the highly educated people, and they just tell him, no, you mad. Like we have no interest in hearing what you're saying. And basically because of their pride and their vanity. If Paul had stopped only on the philosophy of, love one another and this thing, it would be probably they would say, yeah, that's good. Actually, matches what some of our philosophers already say. That's fantastic. The problem is that Paul now starts to talking about a life after death, and starts to say on how we are accountable for what we do here after the death. So he's trying to explain to them that, hey, whatever is going to happen on this promised life that Jesus promised us, it will depend on what we're doing here right now. So our actions have a weight, and that didn't sound good in a lot of people's pride and vanity, and they thought, this is not your place, just leave it. So Paul leaves Athens completely morally destroyed. Like he's so frustrated because his plan, there was like this master plan, now just being destroyed. And he couldn't get it. Like, which part of the gospel they didn't get it? Like, for him, it was like impossible. Those guys are the intelligent people. Which part they didn't get it? So he's now very, very frustrated. His plan didn't work. So he decides to go to Corinth and spends 2 years there. But during those 2 years, he has to support himself because all the apostles at the time lived off from their own work. None of them, everything they do, all the donations they would receive would go for their charity. And all of them would work as a fisherman or whatever was the craftsman that they had at the time, they would do it. And Paul, remember, used to know how to make tents. So he goes to Corinth and he spent 2 years doing that, supporting himself by doing tents and spreading the gospel in Corinth during those 2 years. However, around that time, remember, he already did a whole mission, his first mission, so he already visited quite a few cities. By the time he's here on his second mission, he already also visited quite a few cities. And one of the cities before Athens was Thessalonica. And the problem is that in many of those churches that he started, they start to have problems. So people have doubt. How should we act in terms of this? What should we do this? And then he starts to get letters from here that people say, oh, we need you here. And then he gets a letter, no, we need you here. No, we need you here. And he's like, and to be honest, right now I want to stay in Corinth. Like I need a time for my brain. So he's inspired. He's inspired by the spiritual plan and saying, right, you don't need to go to all those places. He starts right. And that's when he starts writing the letters, the famous letters of Paul, right? And his first 2 letters was to the Thessalonians. So it's in this phase that he's here, second mission journey, that he starts to write the letters, because that would be a way to help everybody. From Corinth, after 2 years, he goes back to Antioch, spends some time in Antioch, sometimes in Caesarea, and then he's now gets ready for his third mission journey. So on his third mission now he's back to Antioch, and then he goes all the way to Ephesus. From Ephesus he goes to Troas, Naples, Philippi, goes back to Corinth, goes to Assos, go to Miletus, Patara, and then he kind of comes back to Jerusalem area, and he ends up in Jerusalem by the end of this third mission. So his third journey is between the years of 50 and 58, and now he has Timothy and Erastus with him. So he's in Antioch, and so this journey goes from Antioch to Jerusalem, passing by all those cities, and the bulk of this 3 years that he's preaching, 2 of those years he spends preaching in Asia Minor, which is this area here. Okay, so the bulk of this time he's actually spent preaching in here. And in Ephesus, he has actually a problem with the local merchants. Remember when Jesus went to the temple and all the merchants in there, they profiting from faith? So basically, there was huge in Ephesus. Like the merchants, like the jewelry makers, everybody was profiting a lot from faith. You know, because people believe they had to make offers to the gods, or I have to make offers to the altar, and the bigger my offer, the better. The more, I'm getting points with the God and all these things. So the merchants were doing a lot of money, profiting a lot of money from faith. And now comes Paul, Timothy, and Erastus, and starts to preach and start to give a new vision of what faith is. Right? It starts to make people realize that, I don't need to make offers, or at least they start to understand that the best offer that you can do for God, it's called charity. It's called love one another. It's called help one another. Love your next and help them as you would like to be loved and helped, right? So they start to bring a new concept of what faith is. Merchants are not happy. Prophets start to go down, 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 down. Don't need to say the 3 of them had to run away from the city because all the merchants now are super mad and they're persecuting them. And literally, if they don't leave the city, they're going to kill them. Okay? So they had this major problem in Ephesus During the period of this third missionary journey, he is in Philip when he writes the second epistle to the Corinthians. And by the end of this this journey, he finishes in Jerusalem and he's arrested. He's arrested by the Jews in the end. At this point, after this is the end of his third mission, by them, like they're ready, really ready to kill him, because the amount of damage in their minds that he has done on these 3 missions is huge. And they realize, well, they had realized he's dangerous for a long time. They have been trying to kill him for quite a while. But now he's arrested, he's in their hands, and he knows he's gonna die. He knows if he's judged by the Jewish law, he knows he's gonna die. He's gonna get the same that Stephen got it, right? So he reminds, you know what? I'm a Roman citizen. Remember, like, back in their soul, it's a Roman citizen. He goes, you know what? I'm a Roman citizen, and I wanted to be judged by Caesar's law. And then they have no option but send him to Rome and be judged in Rome by the Roman law. So that's when he starts his last journey. So Paul is sent to Rome. He's in house arrest for 2 years. During those 2 years, he writes the letters, because now he's 2 years at home, but don't think he's there like, oh my gosh, I'm here. I'm house arrest. Oh, life is terrible. No, he keeps working like there's no tomorrow. And by this time, he's kind of sick already. He's not like, he doesn't have the biggest energy, but he keeps working. He receives visits. People, since he cannot leave the house, but people can visit him. So he receives visits of people, and then he starts writing the letters. So he writes the letters to Philemon, Colossians, Ephesians, and Philippians. Is all done in this phase. After 2 years, because of some influence that he had from the time when he was Saul, he actually is released. And he decides to go to preach a little bit more. So he goes to Macedonia, he goes to Crete, Corinth, and Miletus, and that's when he writes the letter to Timothy and Titus during this period that he's doing this trips in here. And it's believed that it's during this time that his letter to the Hebrews was written. There's nobody really can pinpoint when the letters to Hebrews was written, but they believe there was during this time as well that it was written. Paul is back in Rome. He's actually called because John, the apostle, is now arrested, and Peter sends him a letter and say, we need your help, and maybe try to use your influence to help John. He goes back to Rome and he's arrested, but this time it's not a home arrest anymore. He's now in prison. And Paul knows he's gonna die. He knows his last moment. And when he's in prison, he still, with the help of God, writes his second epistle to Timothy. It's very hard to talk. I cried every time at home there was rehearsing this. It's not easy. So Paul, during all his journeys, all this over 20 years, he spent all his love and all his heart just to teach us one thing. The charity, the love one another, is the most important thing. Don't do that to me. And I think it's a perfect, I think one of these messages that he sent, that it resumes perfectly well what he tried to teach, is in his letter to the Corinth. So his first letter to the Corinthians, when he says, which is a famous one, he says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have charity, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move a mountain, but do not have charity, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have charity, I gain nothing. And some of versions have the word charity substituted by love, because here he sees it as an interchangeable word, because that's what he's saying. It doesn't matter if I believe, I'm a Spiritist, and I believe, yes, I believe there is a life after death, I believe there's God, I believe there is Jesus. But when I live this here, I really live a selfish life. It doesn't matter my faith. It doesn't matter my faith. So he's saying, you know what? Charity or love one another is the most important thing. And Kardec actually brings to us in the gospel, and he says, the Paul says that charity is the most important thing because, first of all, is what really connects us to God. And second, anybody can do it, regardless of belief, regardless of your faith. Everybody can help each other. So that's why charity is the most important. And it's actually in the last, there is 13 verses on this message, and the last verse he says, and now these three remain: faith, hope, and charity. But the greatest of this is charity. So the greatest is love. And that's what Paul wants to bring to us. So now Paul is in jail. You know he's going to die. Keeps his faith until his last breath. And his faith is so unshakable that his accuser, who's supposed to decapitate here, has his hand shaking and feels guilty for what he's doing. But he has to do it. In the spiritual plan, he's received by Ananias. He's the first one to receive him. Followed by Gamaliel. And the three of them together walk around every single city that he had preached. Sorry. And the final spot is exactly the spot when Jesus was crucified. And that moment, he meets Jesus for the second time, who's there ready to receive him. And beside him, there's two very special people. Beside Jesus, there are two very special people waiting for him as well. But you know who they are. You have to read the book. Paul and Stephen. And always remember, without charity, there's no salvation. Thank you.
Right.
I thought I would not need to finish the book that I'm trying for a year.
You have to.
Thank you very much, Teresa. It was a great lecture. Any question, any comments? Anyone?
Yeah, Paul, like, he teaches everyone's heart because he brings this, he is just like one of us, right? Who sometimes we are not believers, and then we are touched by Jesus' love for us and his light, and then we transform ourselves. And that's why we take him in such a deep place in our hearts, because we see us in him. And the charity is so important for Paul, because he sees charity as love, but it's the love in action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only the love that is all here in my mind and in my heart, but it's acting on my love. And when we act on the love, this is when we truly, truly experience the love in a deeper level. Because now we are taking out from the sentiment and from the knowledge, and we are putting it in action. So the whatever we do, we take it to a deeper level. So that's why charity is love in action, because it's so important to Paul, and it's so important to Kardec, and why it's so important to us.
Because in the end, it is the message that Jesus brought, and that's why Jesus condensed the laws in two. Love God above all and love one another. Mm-hmm. So that's what Paul did in a way that it's amazing. And you guys, like, if you read the book, you have no idea what he suffered. Like, I didn't want to bring too much his suffering, because first I wouldn't be able to bear it, and I didn't want to bring more the positive things that happened to him. But he has been forsaken by his family. His whole family turns his back on him. Like, he went through sickness, to so many things during all those 20 years, and he did it. And he did it because his faith was unshakable. one day we'll get there.
Have a comment or question, Angela?
My question. Is the patience a charity?
Is the patience? Yes. Patience, charity. Forgiveness is charity. Tolerance is charity, right? Giving a piece of cloth to someone is feeling cold is charity as well, right? It's there's so many, and I think that's why Kardec and he brought in this, because he says first because charity is what connects us, because it's the law of love, that's what it is, but also it is at reach of anybody. Like anybody can do any kind of a charity, even if it's just sit down with someone in a moment that they need. That's charity, right? Just to listen to them.
Your lecture is charity.
Well, what Portos brought to us is charity, and Emmanuel from bringing the story to us, right?
And Chico.
And Chico, yeah.
You see how many thousands of years they've been giving it to us, and we still don't get it. Yeah. We still don't get it. We still are into this this little part, which is huge, that we are trying to be better each and every day. That, to take away the selfishness that we still have in us. And
In the next life, we will.
But I like
we can start.
yeah,
We have to
so
start
now.
We are starting now.
But I like to believe that at least now we're not ignoring it anymore.
Yeah.
Because maybe 2,000 years ago, who knows, maybe I even had the opportunity to sit there and watch Jesus. I was there like, whatever, right? I completely ignored, who knows, maybe I watched like one of his lectures and I completely ignored. I thought, I don't want to hear this, right? I think at least now we're not ignoring anymore. And we are in the path to want to learn and to want to be his true missionaries. And I think that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
When I read the book, one thing when you brought the, like the first churches and the first church, like the thing that came to me is this is when we, as humanity, we start, in Christians, we start having the notion of having the church inside of us.
Inside of us.
So it's not the building or or anything like that. It's all, it's having Jesus and his love and his teachings inside of us. So each one of us has its own church. And it's on us to make that church bright or be, dim the light or not. So it's
and if you take this old concept of what church is, every time we do our gospel at home with our family together, or even alone, just my kids, I do the spiritual plan, it is a church right there.
absolutely.
That's a little church right there. So we transform our homes in a little church by doing the gospel at home, because that's actually the meaning of the word. It's a group of people gathered together for a religious reason, right? It has nothing to do with the physical space.
And
so, yeah, go ahead.
And when we have the church inside of us, we are taking it wherever you go. It's not on the moment that you are in a physical place, right? It's with you. It's part of you, and you can take that to others at any time, right? Don't need to wait for that moment, that place to be with Jesus. Yeah. Anyone else? Any questions? Any final comments? Yes, go ahead, Angela. We do have
I'm a
time.
little behind, that's why I'm
It's okay.
questions. When we resist the bad, are we doing the good or are we doing the right thing?
When we
Resist the bad, are we doing the good, charity in this case, or are we doing the right thing?
Let me repeat the question just to make sure that people on the internet can know what the question is. So Angela is asking if when we are not doing the bad, right, resisting to do bad things, are we doing charity or just doing what is right?
I think you have to analyze the whole story. I think each situation. I think in some situations could be you just doing the right thing. In some of them could be charity. Because sometimes by avoiding doing the wrong thing, we are avoiding to hurt someone, and to a certain extent that's charity. To me, if just taking no in consideration that I don't have any details of any story, I would say it's more considered you doing the right thing. We know by the Kardec's studies that just to not do the bad is not enough, because the fact that I'm not doing something wrong doesn't mean that I'm doing something good. So we kind of have to have both things together. However, depending what it's my moral evolution, maybe just the fact that I'm actually now avoiding to do the bad, that must be huge for me, for my moral evolution, for the spot where I am. Then someone must be a way bigger transformation than someone who's already doing the good, you know. So I think you have to take the consideration in each situation.
So when we do the right thing, doesn't mean we're not doing charity. So we're doing good for ourselves in this case, because we're resisting the bad.
We're doing good for ourselves and to other people.
Into other people.
Because we're not harming the others.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you're
because
teaching, you being a role model too,
Mm-hmm.
to everybody around you. Incarnate and discarnate.
Yeah. Good point. Because I always remember being a role model to the incarnated, but we forgot the discarnated around us that also can learn.
Thank you.
Sure.
Pleasure.
All right, so we still have 5 minutes. Anyone have any questions? Maybe any final questions or comments? Otherwise, we can go to the passes. All right, so thank you, everyone. Thank you for those watching us through the internet. We hope to see you guys next week. And for those who's here, we just get prepared for the passes. Right. Thank you.